out to that family. Well, tonight we're going to go in a new direction. Job, he just about wore me out, So we're going to leave Job sitting in ashes today, and we're going to go on to another direction. There's a character in the Old Testament that just fascinates me. He just is so interesting. And this character, he shows up all through the Bible. Not him person, but his name and his reputation. And everybody refers to him. Jesus referred to him. In fact, some thought Jesus was this guy. And his name is Elijah. And we're going to follow Elijah's life out of 1 Kings. We're going to start in 17 tonight. We're going to, for a couple of weeks, however long it takes to get through his life, we're going to follow him and see what he does and what he can teach us about living in a world kind of like ours today. Even though the technologies were certainly different, and the different social and cultural things were radically different, but it was a time of really rapid change, and it was a time of religious decline. The children of Israel, of course, came out of the promised land, came to the promised land, and then they spread out all over it. And so we're up in the north part of the country. Now we're up in the Israel country. The Judah country is around Jerusalem, and the nation's sort of divided now. And so we're up in the north around Samaria. The Sumerians built an opposing temple up there, and so they were worshiping God in two different places. But that's kind of neither here nor there. But we're going to look at Elijah and follow his life and watch him handle things as a radical change goes on, and there's a lot of religious decline. I felt like it would be so good for us to go through that because it's very similar to today. There is so much declining and things changing in the last few years. I'm sort of concerned, really concerned, about the future of our nation, of our churches, of the whole world. It seems to me that the foundations right now are being shaken. It seems like the things we built our lives on, we stood on, we planned on being there, and we hoped would stay forever. It seems like they're shaking, and it's hard to find a place to stand on a solid ground. I think, in fact, the foundations of our faith are being systematically destroyed in our world today. There's another thing that's changing radically in our nation, and that is what we call the moral absolutes. Now, these moral absolutes are things that when we were younger, when I was younger, you didn't question them. They were just absolutes. They were never called into question. Today, it seems like everything is called into question, and our Christian heritage seems to be moving toward this thing called relativism. Are you familiar with the term of relativism? Everything is related. In other words, if it's you believe your way and I'll believe my way, and everybody will just get along. Well, everything's relative. In other words, it's relative to what you think about it. So there's no absolutes anymore. There seems to be just some really radical changes going on. Now, this relativism has been built on secular humanism, as well as a lot of evolutionary thinking has gone into it. Evolution. It all works into the thinking of today, and we wrap it into a big package and call it New Age philosophy. But it is taking place. It's really making a headway in our world today, even in our churches, in everything, our country, everything. So what's happening is, the result of this is, there is a growing hostility toward the things of God and Christians. We used to be the favored child in the nation. I mean, everything was looked on the Christian church with favor, but that's not the case anymore. It seems like we have really seen that change, and people who want to follow God and the Bible are thought of as radicals, and some people are even calling us terrorists because we believe in the fundamental, solid basis of the Bible. Things are changing. Well, we see that so much decline in government, education, the workplace, our economy, our home, our entertainment, the church. See, the divorce rates are climbing, drugs are everywhere, crimes in the street, corporate America, and our government. It seems like there's so much going on today. And the violence, we see on TV every night, and even among small children. The militant gay movement, the rise of the occult and cults. It really paints a grisly picture for our country. And I know this is not the first time you've been aware of that. We've known this and we've watched it coming. But we are the people we are the believers who are here at this time. And it is our job to resist that change, to try to turn us back to a nation based upon the Bible, upon God's Word. Restore the trust and value of our churches and our Christian heritage. It's time. So Elijah, the Old Testament prophet, had some of the same things to do in his life. Because as we unpack the history of it, we see that Jezebel and Ahab was a Jew, but Jezebel wasn't. And Ahab was the king in the north. He was the king in Israel. And he married Jezebel. And Jezebel was a pagan. She worshipped false gods. She had the temple full, the northern temple up in Samaria. They had it filled with priests of Baal. And I mean, there was competing religions going on right in the whole countryside up there. And it was a time of really radical change. So let's follow this man named Elijah, because he is very important to know a lot about, because as I said, we're going to hear his name all through the Bible. I mean, he just keeps showing up, his name. They refer to him and look to him. So let's see if we can learn some more and about him and then follow him. See what we can learn. In Elijah's day, the Jewish people were systematically leaving their faith. They were abandoning the foundations, the Judaism. They were walking away from it. Now, what's happening is the God, the Yahweh, that's the God we worship. That's our Father Jehovah. They followed Yahweh all the way from Egypt, all through the desert. Had all the cloud and the rain and the manna on the ground. Jehovah brought them right into the promised land, and they saw him every day. They were in his presence. They experienced his love and his protection, and then they got comfortable in the promised land. They made their homes. They built their vineyards. They settled in, and time began to pass. And what they did was they abandoned Jehovah and began, not completely, they still believed in him, but they brought in also the gods of the Canaanites. The Canaanite god, which is the head god, was Baal. Now, Baal was a god of the storm. He's called the storm god. And the reason that was important was that was an agrarian society. Agriculture was everybody's business. They raised their crops, they raised their animals, and the fertility of their flocks and the fertility of the ground and the rain that was to fall, that was very important. And the locals all believed that Baal was in charge of the rain and the fertility and the crops. And so Jehovah, he was the God of the universe. And so they kept him, but they also embraced worshiping Baal, thinking it would bless them financially and take care of their crops and their ground. So they worshipped him. They, as I said, they worshipped both. Now let me tell you about the prophets of Baal. These were house guys. They kind of like to stay in the house. They didn't like to get out in the wild and country. They were kind of effeminate, and they dressed in real pretty clothes. I mean, they dressed up pretty. White robes, and they had pointy white hats. And but you can just see them. I mean, they were really, well, today we think of them as comical, but in an agrarian society, in a very primitive way, these Baal prophets, they looked real pretty. I mean, they looked sharp. You walk into a Baal temple, and boy, these people, they're doing something here. I mean, this is looking good. And so now we're going to meet Elijah. Now Elijah shows up on the scene, and he's not an inside the house guy. He's an outside the house guy. He comes dressed in a camel skin coat. All right? Can you imagine you've seen them old scraggly looking camels? Well, his camel skin was dark. It was black. But he dressed in this camel skin coat, and I'm sure he was much like John the Baptist and some of the other mountain men who came out of the back country, and Elijah just shows up on the scene. He's this wild guy with hair everywhere and camel skin coats, and he don't look pretty like the Baal prophets do. But he is a prophet, and he is one of the very first prophets that we meet in the Bible, and he comes with a message from God. He comes and he speaks to God. He has no agenda. He's not trying to run for any kind of office. He doesn't want any higher salary. He comes to speak God's word to the people and to try to return them to the love of God. So we see all this going on in this. We have this great contrast. We see Elijah, this rough and ready mountain man, and then the priests of Baal, and they're real pretty. Okay. Now, let's talk about Elijah a little bit more. He's from the area called Tishbe. He's a Tishbite. It's not like a tick bite. It's close, but he's from Tishbe. And Tishbe, it's a rugged, dry, desert type area. Gilead is where it is. And the people who come here, they're called settlers. In other words, they settled in here and they moved around. They were people that you need to get the feeling that they were kind of pioneer type people. And they moved into to this area called Tishbe up in Gilead. And they were solemn. They were tough people. They didn't speak very much. When they spoke, it was directly. It was sparse. Their language is sparse. Kind of like talking to my grandson. He has hardly, he doesn't have anything but to say, "How you doing?" "Fine." As a whole afternoon's conversation. Right? So God appointed Elijah. He said, Elijah, I want you to confront these Baalites. I want you to stand up against them. I want you to speak the word of God to them. I want you to tell them who I am and tell them that there is no such God as Baal at all. He doesn't even exist. But they're worshiping this false god. And you need to stand up against Ahab, who was a Jew, and his evil wife, Jezebel. Jezebel. That's a funny sounding name, isn't it? You don't hear many women named Jezebel today. Anybody here named Jezebel? It's a pretty name. Elijah means Yahweh is my God, or Yahweh is God. The J-A-H is the Yahweh, and Eli is God, the God, Jehovah God. And his name says, Jehovah is my God. Jezebel, the last part of her name is Baal. It has the Baal in it. The B-E-L is the name of her God, Jezebel. Just thought you'd kind of like to know that. Ahab was the 7th king of Israel. Now remember, we got Judah in the south, we got Israel in the north. And so Ahab was the 7th king in Israel. Since Jeroboam the first, the son of and successor of Omri, and the husband of Jezebel of Sidon, according to the Hebrew Bible. In other words, we find that Ahab comes from the lines of kings, and he was the husband of Jezebel, and she was from Sidon. Now, Ahab became king of Israel in the 38th year of Asa, who was the king in the south, in Judah, down in Jerusalem. So he became king then in the 38th year of Asa's reign. And he reigned for 22 years. So Ahab's been ruling in Samaria, up in the northern kingdom, for 22 years. Now, down south, in Jerusalem, those kings down there are all direct descendants of David. Okay, they sit on David's throne, and they're the direct descendants of him. But over time, there was this competition and the dividing of the two nations into one nation into two. And so the more liberal northern tribes, they were sliding into idolatry faster than the southern tribes, who were still holding on to more of their roots. Now, nothing is more important for any generation than to pass their faith on to the next generation. Nothing is more important. We have no cause in our church or in our families or in our nation that's more pressing than that. You see, if we fail to pass our faith to the next generation, you do the math, it wouldn't take long for there to be no more faith. So we've got to do a good job of passing that on and turning the reins of leadership to that next generation and ensure that they have solid foundation to build their lives on. So I want to charge you, mothers and fathers and you grandmas and grandpas who are here today, make sure you've done everything you can do and are doing everything you can do to pass on a true faith to your children and your grandchildren. Nothing you do is more important than that. Nothing. You can leave them with a lot of money, a lot of land or whatever. That's not important. They'll blow that about 3 months after you're gone anyway. But what you need to do is leave them a solid faith in the Lord and a biblical basis for their decisions. In times of rapid change, the foundations of our lives are very important. And even today, because things are so rapidly changing, it's making the foundations more important than ever before. So we have to solidly go back and investigate those foundation stones and see how we're doing and make sure we're passing that on quickly. So what should we ask God to help us do? This is what I thought to myself today. Okay, God, I'm into this. I believe this. What do I need to pray for? What do I need to ask you to do to help me pass my faith on to the next generation? What do I need to do? What are some things that I need to watch for and avoid? Help me, God, to be a good passer on of my faith. And so, how do I do that? And then I want to go now to Elijah and to 1 Kings 17. And let's see if we can read down through this and answer that question, because God speaks directly to us through this. And let's just keep reading. Start reading here. It says, Now Elijah the Tishbite from Tishba in Gilead said to Ahab, As the Lord, the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years, except at my word. Now, what we have here is God said to Elijah, Elijah, here's what you need to do. And I want to say to you today, here's, I believe, how we need to do, what we need to do to pass our faith on. And that is, have the boldness to speak. We need to speak out and speak up. We need to have boldness to speak truth to our children and our grandchildren. We need to have boldness to speak to our nation, our government, our churches. We need to have the boldness to speak up the truth. And so God said to Elijah, Elijah, I want you to walk right into Ahab's office. I want you to point your bony finger right under his nose and say, God has just told you it's not going to rain anymore until you say so. In other words, God gave Elijah great authority to hold that drought and to keep rain from coming. He said, Elijah, I'm going to leave it in your hands. I'll tell you later, but just go tell him it's not going to rain for the next few years. So Elijah's first public act, the first thing we ever see this great prophet do. Remember what he looks like. He's not going to be pretty like Baal's people. He's coming in rough and tough and hair everywhere and probably doesn't smell very good. And he walks into Ahab's office. And he says to Ahab, God says this to you. I don't know what kind of impression that made, but I think Elijah may have made him a little mad. Now think about it. I imagine he made him a little aggravated. How dare you come in here? Tell me this. I don't know for sure, but I think when we follow the rest of the story, we're going to see he didn't like it at all. But he had boldness to stand before the king. Who else in the Bible do we remember that had great boldness? What about little Esther? Remember her? God picked her up and said, little Esther, I want you to go speak to the king on behalf of your people. And she said, if I go and I'm going without an invitation, he can kill me. That's the rules. And so she went in anyway. She had boldness to speak. And sometimes I think we are lacking some boldness today in our country and in our nation, in our families, and in our churches. I think we're letting some things happen, and we're not standing up for truth and not speaking the truth as we need to. So we must boldly stand against the evil creeping into our nation. We need to stop letting it happen and stand and say, this is wrong, and this is what God thinks about this, and we need to have that kind of courage to stand. Then, the next thing I think, at the answers to my prayer was, I said, God, what do I need to do? And God says, you need to be bold to speak. And I think he says to me and to you, he says, we need to have the courage to trust. We need to have the courage to trust God. We need to trust him no matter what. Let's keep reading verse 2. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah. Now get it now. He'd spoken to Ahab and he told him what's happening. And then God spoke to him again. And he said, leave here, turn eastward, and hide in the Kerith ravine east of the Jordan. You will drink from the brook, and I have directed the ravens to supply you with food there. You've done what, God? You've ordered what to bring me my food? I've ordered ravens, crows. You get it? Shake your head like this if we're communicating. He said, I've had crows to send you the food. Verse 5. So he did what the Lord had told him. He went to the Kerith ravine, east of the Jordan, and stayed there. The ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. Okay. Just I want you to get that in your mind. This is what God had this prophet to do. Now, he was a mountain man. He was a man of the wilderness. He was used to this sort of a lifestyle, a rugged, a rural life. He was used to that, but man, that takes some trust to trust a bunch of birds to bring you something to eat. I've heard of eating like a bird, but now this is ridiculous. So this was a dry creek. This was a dry creek. I mean, there's a little water in it. You've seen dry creeks, and once in a while there'll be a little puddle here and a little puddle there. This is a dry creek. It's a ravine, a wadi, as they call it. And he had to go there and wait. And I'm sure he was pretty concerned about what kind of food those crows would bring him. Now, here's the amazing part. He did exactly what God said, and he trusted the Lord to take care of him. He did it. He said, "You got it, sir." "Yes, sir. I will go and I will wait." That's courage to trust. Courage to trust. Now, tonight, how are you doing with your trust issues with the Lord? Has God told you some things? Made you some promises? Said some things directly to you about what you need to be doing? And He said, "You go do this, and then I'll take care of you, and I'll bless you." And how are we doing in that regard? I mean, when things are going real good, it's easy to trust Him, isn't it? Sometimes we have to drink out of the creek and eat from the birds. But we still trust God whenever that happens. So, the creek, we're there in this creek trying to make a living here we're waiting on the Lord, waiting on God to speak, waiting for God to tell me what to do. So, I'm going to start praying for boldness. Then I'm going to start praying for courage. Lord, give me the courage to trust you. Now, let's keep going. There's something else. The next thing I want to talk about is I think I want to start praying for a heart of thanksgiving, appreciation. Just a heart that says, "Thank you, God, for what you're doing." I think that's important. I believe that's something that'll change our world. Whenever a bunch of Christians start getting thankful for what God's doing, thankful and expressing that and not being so demanding and have so many high expectations of others, but to begin to love and to be thankful. Let's read a little bit more about this. Verse 7. Sometime later, the brook dried up. Must have been southwest Missouri in August. Right? The little creek dried up. The little pools of water he was drinking out of, they went away. The little bugs were swimming in it, and then there wasn't any water, no bugs. It was gone. Because there had been no rain in the land. Why hadn't there been any rain in the land? Because God said there wasn't going to be any rain in the land. And so we see now it dried up. Now here he is in this situation. He's down at the dry creek, trying to eat what the birds had brought him. And then verse 8, then the word of the Lord came to him, "Go at once to Zarephath in the region of Sidon and stay there." Okay? Go to Zarephath and stay there. Stay there at this place. I'm going to let you leave here. Here it is. "I have directed a widow there to supply you with food." Okay, crows, first of all, are bringing me my food, and now a widow is going to take care of me. Man, what do you think about that? I mean, he's thinking, a widow. Now, a widow today, it's not like a widow then. A widow in those days had nobody to take care of her. She was destitute, probably starving to death, even in the best of times. And so now a widow's going to take care of him. So I'm sure he was beginning to wonder what was going on. So he said God had a new direction. He had a new window open for him, and he told him to go. I got a sense about me that Elijah had a question or two about God. So, God, are you sure you know what you're doing? Has anybody in here felt like that? God, are you sure you know what you're doing with me? The creek's dried up, and I'm tired of eating crow food. God, are you sure you know? Now you want to send me to a widow? God, are you okay? So he went there to Zarephath. When he walked into the city, to the city gate, it was a very small city, I'm sure. And he walked through the gate, he met a widow there. And when he met this widow, what was she doing? She was gathering sticks to build a fire, to cook the last little meal that she and her son had, and then she was going to die. Going to starve to death. Okay, let's read it. And he called to her and asked, would you bring me a little water in a jar? We're in verse 10. Would you bring me a little water in a jar so that I may have a drink? And as she was going to get it, he called, and bring me, please, a piece of bread. Oh, while you're at it, while you're in there in the kitchen, bring me a piece of bread. Okay. As surely as the Lord lives, she replied. Verse 12. I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug, and I'm gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. The widow started to get Elijah water when he also asked for food. So the woman replied, okay, water, I'll get you some water. But you need to know, Elijah, I don't have much to share with you. I just have enough for one more little meal, and then it's all over. So Elijah said to her in verse 13, don't be afraid, go home and do as you have said. But first make me a small loaf of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me, and then make something for yourself and your son. He asked a lot of that widow woman, didn't he? She just got through telling him, I don't have enough food except for me and my son in our last meal. And he said, okay, I get it, but you go ahead and make me a piece of bread. Kind of sounds selfish almost, wouldn't it? I thought that too. That sounds a little selfish. But he said, make me a loaf of bread, make me some bread, and then you go back and make you some. And then what does he say? Verse 14, for this is what the Lord, the God of Israel says, the jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land. She went away and did as Elijah told her. So there was food every day for Elijah and for the woman and her family. For the jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the word of the Lord spoken by Elijah. Okay, God is testing this prophet. He's using him in a very difficult situation and feeding him with crows. But nevertheless, all this, I think Elijah has a heart of thanksgiving. He says, God, thank you. I'll eat what the crows bring me. I'll eat with what this widow has left over. I'll do it because you said. So he went his way and did what God told him to do. Faith is how God's people are to live their lives. That's how we're to live. Every day we're to live by faith. Faith to hold onto our beliefs, to be bold in our beliefs. Courage to stand for the truth. And the humility to accept God's help. That's what we do every day. And I think what we need to do is work to make our faith better and stronger every day. And trust God. That's what faith is. Trust Him. He's taken care of you. He hadn't forgotten you. He knows where you are. He knows who you are. He knows your pain. He knows your difficulties. He's taken care of you. Trust Him. You may think He's feeding you like a bird, but hang in there. Trust Him. Trust Him. Jesus,